Welcome back, sleepyhead. Or maybe it's your first time here. Either way, I'm glad you've arrived. Tell me what's your favorite way to unwind before bed. Write it below while the rain begins to fall. And if you'd like me to read to you again, just subscribe. I'll be here every night. Now, let's begin our little ritual. I found the notebook on a Wednesday afternoon, though I didn't climb to the rooftop looking for anything. I just wanted space, quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists above the noise, the kind you have to earn by climbing narrow concrete steps that echo too loudly, by pushing open a rusted door that's always heavier than it looks. The rooftop was bare, mostly. Weathered concrete, two crooked chairs someone had once dragged up for the view, and a dented metal table no one used anymore. But in the far corner, tucked behind the low wall where pigeons sometimes gathered, was a notebook. Soft blue cover, edges frayed. It looked like it had been left behind, forgotten. But when I picked it up, I knew immediately it hadn't been. The first page was blank, so was the second. But the third had a single black ink line drawn across the middle, not straight, not wild, just there, deliberate. The next page held a shape, simple and precise, a half circle filled with dots, then a page with a faint water stain and nothing else. Then another with a spiral, centered perfectly. I flipped slowly, not sure if I was intruding or being invited. No words, no names, no explanations, just symbols. Empty space. Some pages were completely untouched. Others had lines as fine as hair, layered until they almost vibrated. I didn't understand them, not exactly. But I felt them, like someone had been trying to say something in a language I almost knew. I didn't take it with me. I left it exactly where I found it, set it back down on the concrete, tucked beneath a loose brick to keep the wind from turning its pages. That night, I kept thinking about it, not about what it meant, about the care it took to make something and then leave it behind, unguarded. The next evening, I climbed back up. The notebook was still there, unmoved, and this time I brought a pen. I didn't write, not words, but I turned to one of the blank pages in the back and drew a small shape, a quiet echo of one I had seen earlier. My hand trembled slightly. I wasn't trying to make art. I was replying. I closed the book and placed it back the way I'd found it. That night I slept better than I had in weeks. I waited 3 days before going back. Not because I was afraid, but because something told me not to crowd it. Some spaces don't like to be rushed. Some silences deserve time to breathe. But the notebook stayed with me, not physically, but in the way certain things hum beneath your skin when the rest of the world is quiet. I kept wondering whether my drawing had stayed untouched, whether it had been turned to, studied, maybe misunderstood. When I finally returned, the notebook was exactly where I'd left it. Same brick, same corner, same faded weight against the rooftop breeze. I knelt, slower this time, almost reverently. I turned the pages carefully, unsure what I was hoping to find. And then I saw it the page after mine, a response. Someone had added a second shape next to mine, curved and intersecting just slightly, like 2 drops of water overlapping in stillness. There were no words, no arrows, no marks of ownership, just that one additional shape, drawn in ink I hadn't used. It felt like being answered in a dream, subtle, unquestionable, deeply familiar, even though we had never met. I exhaled slowly, not relief, not surprise, more like recognition. I traced the edge of the drawing with my finger, not touching the ink, just letting myself be near it. Then I turned another page, blank, an invitation. I drew something. Again, not a reply this time, but a beginning. 3 lines, parallel, close, but not touching. I closed the book gently and left it under the brick again, stepping back without looking at the sky, without rushing. That night, I didn't tell anyone where I had been. I made tea slowly. I sat with both hands around the mug, staring into steam. The rooftop was a place of its own now. Not just a view, not just space. It was a presence, one I was sharing with someone I didn't know, but already trusted. Over the next 2 weeks, we filled 4 pages, never more than 1 drawing each, never on the same day. Sometimes it would be 5 days before something new appeared. Sometimes only 1. We never crossed out, never corrected, just added, just listened. One afternoon, I drew something that felt more honest than I'd meant to a small broken circle, not incomplete but gently frayed. And when I returned 2 days later, I found it surrounded by 7 tiny dots, evenly spaced, like quiet company. I sat beside the notebook for a long time that day. I didn't draw anything. I just sat. And in the quiet, I whispered aloud so softly. The wind might have stolen it. I'm here. I didn't need to know who they were. I already knew enough. They were paying attention. One day, I arrived at the rooftop and found the notebook had been moved. Not far, just a few inches. It was now resting closer to the edge of the brick wall, as if it had been shifted intentionally. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe the wind, maybe someone had come before me. But when I opened it, I saw the change. The page was no longer blank. A single simple line had been drawn at the top, and in the corner, in the same ink but a different hand, was a small, carefully written note. I'm not sure how to say goodbye. I paused, feeling something shift in my chest. It wasn't fear, not exactly. More like the quiet realization that even the most unnoticed of exchanges can carry a weight, a depth, that we aren't always ready for. I closed the book and didn't touch it. I didn't add anything for 2 days. I just stood by the fence, watching the clouds drift, listening to the faint hum of the city below. I thought about the person I was sharing this with. I wondered if they knew how much their silence had already spoken to me. On the 3rd day, I returned to the notebook, and there, in the center of the page, was something new. Not a drawing, not a shape, but a word. A single word written in that same careful hand. Maybe. No explanation, no question mark, just the quiet possibility of something left unsaid. I sat for a long while, my hands folded in my lap, letting the weight of it settle. Maybe what? Maybe we all leave things unfinished. Maybe we are not meant to know the answers to every question. Maybe some things are better left unspoken, but still understood. I didn't write anything that day. I just let myself feel the space. I let the wind move through the pages, turn them gently without trying to control what came next. A few more days passed. I didn't go back immediately. I wasn't avoiding it. I was just waiting. Waiting for something I couldn't name, something I knew had to come in its own time. I found myself paying attention to the smallest things in my life. The sound of the kettle boiling, the way the light hit the edge of my desk, the way people spoke in passing, never really listening. I was becoming quieter, more aware of the things that happened when no one was watching. The notebook had become something more than a series of shapes and symbols. It had become a space where I could breathe without expectation, where I could leave parts of myself that I didn't need to explain. And when I finally returned, the notebook was still there, the pages now full of quiet drawings, the ink worn from use. But when I opened it, there was no new note, no new words, just a single, final drawing, a circle, simple, complete, drawn with the same care as all the rest. No end, just a shape, as if to say, this is all there needs to be. And for the first time, I understood. Not the drawings, not the person across from me, but the fact that this exchange, this quiet space we'd shared, was never about answers. It was about presence, about being seen without having to speak. And I knew, with a certainty that didn't need to be explained, that it had never been about finishing. It had always been about starting. After that last circle, I stopped going up for a while. Not because something had ended, but because something inside me had settled. It felt like the closing of a book you know you'll never forget. The kind you don't need to reread to carry with you. The notebook had become a kind of mirror, reflecting parts of me I hadn't looked at in a long time. And now, with its pages full, I didn't feel empty. I felt accompanied. I moved through my days differently. I noticed things, not just saw them, but noticed. A hand brushing crumbs from a table. The way a child hesitated before stepping onto a crosswalk. The way steam curved in the air above a paper cup. These were the drawings now. These were the shapes left behind in silence. I didn't tell anyone about the notebook. It was too quiet a thing to put into words, but I felt it with me, especially when things were still early mornings, elevator rides, moments when I paused before answering someone and thought, there's more here than I can say. One evening, walking home, I passed a chalk drawing on the sidewalk. A circle, not perfect, not bold, and beside it, just faintly, someone had written, "You were here." My breath caught. I didn't stop walking, but something pulled at me. Not recognition, exactly just that strange familiarity that lives inside moments that echo. I began carrying a notebook of my own, blank pages. No plan, no structure. I didn't draw much, just left little marks, reminders to myself. A line here, a shape there. Nothing beautiful, nothing meant for anyone else. But somehow, it made me feel like I was still listening, still present in the quiet space we had opened together. I started writing short phrases in the margins, not poems, not affirmations, just small truths I didn't want to lose. One said, "Stillness is not the absence of movement, it's the presence of attention." Another, "We leave echoes in places we thought we passed through, unnoticed." I kept the notebook with me, even when I didn't write in it. It became a kind of anchor. And sometimes, when I passed the building, I would look up toward the rooftop door, not expecting to see anyone, but still feeling that the space hadn't closed entirely, that it was still open, waiting, even if nothing new was added. Some things don't continue outward, they grow inward. They live in the way you touch the world afterward. It happened by accident. I had taken a different route. Home construction had blocked the street I usually crossed, and I found myself in a part of the neighborhood I rarely walked through. Narrower streets, older buildings, windows closer to the sky. The light had that late-day softness that makes everything look like it belongs in a memory. And then I saw it. Not the notebook, not the same shapes, but a rooftop, much like mine. And on the far edge of it, something unmistakable. A small pile of stones arranged in a circle. Deliberate, balanced, quiet. I stopped walking. I couldn't explain why, but my body knew before I did. That wasn't random. That wasn't debris. That was intention. It made me wonder how many rooftops carry small stories we never see. How many silent exchanges are happening between people who never meet, who never speak, but who feel the world a little more softly than they used to. I didn't climb the stairs to that building. It wasn't mine. And that, somehow, felt important. But I stood across the street a little longer than I needed to, just looking, just listening inwardly. The stones said nothing, but their arrangement carried the same weight I'd come to recognize. Attention without expectation. Care without reward. I kept walking, but everything looked different after that. Graffiti became possible messages. Cracks in the sidewalk felt like passages. A bag of bread left on a step became a gesture instead of forgetfulness. I was beginning to understand what I had shared on that rooftop wasn't just an isolated moment. It was a glimpse, a reminder, that beneath the noise, the rush, the practiced distance of daily life, there were still people leaving pieces of themselves behind in quiet ways. Notes, drawings, arrangements of objects that only make sense to those who are paying attention. The city was full of it, I realized, full of unsent messages, of pages turned in silence, and I thought maybe the person I drew with had done this before. Maybe they would do it again. Maybe I wasn't the first page in their story, or the last. And, strangely, that didn't make it feel less meaningful. It made it feel wider, like I'd stepped into a current that was always there, just below the surface, waiting for anyone who paused long enough to feel it. I walked home slower that evening, not to make the moment last, but to notice how many I usually missed. That night, I opened my own notebook and drew something I hadn't drawn before. 2 rooftops, far apart, with a single line connecting them. Not straight, not perfect, just steady. It took me almost a month to go back. I told myself I didn't need to, that what had happened was complete, that I was carrying it with me now, and that was true. But there was a pull, not strong, not urgent, just steady. A soft tug behind the ribs that said, maybe there's something waiting. Not a person, not a message, just presence. The door to the rooftop felt heavier than I remembered. Or maybe I was just more aware of how slowly it opened. The wind was stronger that day, and for a moment I thought the notebook might be gone. But when I stepped out, it was still there. Same corner, same brick. The cover was a little more weathered now, and a few pages flapped gently in the breeze. I sat beside it without touching it at first, just breathing, just letting the air wrap around me the way it always did here, thinner, quieter, like the city had been muted. When I finally opened the cover, I expected to find it as I'd left it, full, finished. But there, tucked between the last page and the back cover, was a folded sheet of new paper, crisp, clean, a different kind of intentional. My chest tightened. I unfolded it carefully. On one side, a shape, familiar in rhythm, unfamiliar in design. A delicate thread of lines bending into something like a leaf or maybe a flame. And below it, a single phrase, written in that same hand I hadn't seen since the word maybe. Some roots grow after you stop watering them. I stared at it longer than I needed to. Not to understand it, I already did, but to feel the full weight of being seen again, of being remembered, not as an ending, as a continuation. I didn't draw anything in response, not right away. I just held the paper, then refolded it and placed it gently back inside. I looked out over the rooftops, the stretch of buildings that now felt less distant, less indifferent, and I whispered, not to the page, not to whoever had left it, but to the space between all of it. I haven't stopped paying attention. I stayed until the wind picked up, until the notebook's pages started to lift again on their own, like they were reaching, and I realized maybe this place wasn't finished. Maybe it was only pausing. Maybe it was waiting for someone else now. Or maybe it was waiting for me to return in a new way. I stood slowly, not rushing. I took one last look at the city stretched around me, then turned toward the stairs. And for the first time, I felt it not just that I'd been changed, but that maybe, quietly, I'd changed something too. I didn't return to the rooftop for a while, not because it had lost its meaning, but because I had started to find that same quiet in other places. There was something different in the way I moved through the world now, like I had learned to look for openings instead of answers. And slowly, without deciding to, I began leaving small things behind. I started with a single paper square, folded neatly, left on a bench at the park I passed through on Tuesdays. Nothing written, just a small symbol, a half sun, drawn gently in pencil. I didn't wait to see if anyone found it. That wasn't the point. It wasn't a message. It was a presence. After that, I left a word still written on a smooth stone placed at the base of a tree near the library. Another time, I slipped a page torn from my notebook behind the shelf of old novels at the corner bookstore. It had a drawing on it, a pattern of quiet spirals, and a sentence that had followed me for days. You are allowed to be here, even without explaining why. I never signed anything, never expected reply, and yet, something about doing it, about giving without needing to be seen, settled something inside me, like I was continuing the line someone else had started. Not mimicking, echoing. A teacher once told me that presence is a kind of language, one we speak long before we learn to talk. I didn't understand it then. I do now. One day, I passed a bulletin board in a laundromat and noticed a new slip pinned between old ads and lost pet flyers. It had no contact info, no image. Just a phrase written in blue pen, slightly slanted. This moment matters, even if no one claps for it. I stood in front of it longer than I meant to. I didn't take it, didn't write anything next to it. I just read it twice, let it land, then left. But the feeling followed me home, that maybe someone else, somewhere, was doing what I was doing. That maybe we were all writing into the same invisible notebook, one page at a time, across rooftops and sidewalks and benches and walls, not coordinated, not organized, just connected by the act of noticing. I opened my own notebook that night and wrote at the top of a blank page, what if we're already in conversation with strangers who understand us better than we realize? I didn't answer the question. I just let it sit there, breathing with me. I wasn't looking for the person from the rooftop anymore, but I knew deep down that I hadn't lost them. You don't lose people who showed you how to listen. It was in a small cafe. I didn't usually go to a corner spot with flickering lights and too few tables. I'd stopped in for shelter more than coffee, a sudden spring rain catching me unprepared. I ordered something warm and sat near the window, watching the drops trace long, slow lines down the glass. At the table beside me, someone sat alone, young, curled inward, notebook open, head tilted down. I wasn't looking for anything, but I noticed the edge of a page, a small, familiar shape drawn in the corner, not exactly like ours, but familiar. A curve, a line, empty space. I looked away. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was coincidence. But then, without looking up, they turned the notebook just slightly, angling it outward. A subtle shift, not enough to be obvious, just enough that I could see the page. It was filled with patterns, spirals, stacked lines, shapes that looked like echoes. It took me a moment to understand what I was seeing, not just the drawings, but the offering, the permission, the quiet yes. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the smallest page I'd been carrying for weeks, a folded square I hadn't known what to do with until now. On it, one phrase, I've been listening too. I set it on the edge of their table as I stood to leave. They didn't look up, but they touched the paper gently, as if they already understood. Outside, the rain had softened. I walked slower than usual, not because I needed time to think, but because I didn't want to hurry what was already unfolding. I didn't know who they were. I didn't need to. That was never the point. What mattered was that the conversation hadn't ended. It had simply changed hands. A new page, a new quiet, a new listener. And somewhere above the city, maybe on a rooftop, maybe in a stairwell, maybe on the back of a receipt tucked into a book, someone else was drawing something they didn't know how to explain. And someone else would answer, not loudly, not all at once, but gently, without asking anything in return, just to say, I see you too.